Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass halfway completed, I think it's safe to say we now have a pretty clear idea of the quality of these new retro tracks. Whether or not you think they're good or bad is up to you, though I personally think they're getting a lot better. Wave 3 especially was really solid when compared to the other two, however I do think it's important to say that these tracks are definitely on a smaller scale quality-wise when compared to the base Mario Kart 8 Deluxe retro tracks. Almost every track that has been brought over to Mario Kart 8 and its original DLC have been heavily updated to not only make them look better, but also play better as well. Two tracks in particular stand out above the rest as being very strong remakes, to the point that I believe they are the best retro tracks in the entire Mario Kart series. Those two tracks are Cheeseland and Ribbon Road, both from Mario Kart Super Circuit. Welcome to another episode of Level by Level. Today I want to take a look at these two tracks and explain why I believe these to be the best retro tracks in the series. I think it's only fair to reflect on what made these two tracks so good so that we can understand why the Booster Course Pass to some is a bit of a letdown. With that said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right into the two best retro tracks in the Mario Kart series. First, I want to explain what I mean by the best retro tracks, as I'm sure I've already got a ton of comments screaming at me about other courses like Rainbow Road 3DS and Waluigi Pinball. When I say best retro track, I don't necessarily mean it's the best course to play on of the retro selection. Okay, I know that may seem dumb, let me explain. Yes, I do think Rainbow Road 3DS is a better track overall than these two, however, I don't think its remake did as good of a job as the remake for Cheeseland and Ribbon Road. When I'm looking at a retro course, I'm looking for two main things. First off, the obvious, is it fun to play on, which applies to every course in the game. The second one, though, is how well did they adapt this course to the new game. Every retro track gets different levels of changes from their original. Almost all of them get graphical updates as they move up to better hardware. I say almost because I genuinely can't tell if Mario Circuit 3 is uglier than the original. The lucky retro tracks though will also get gameplay changes, and that's the major thing I want to focus on today. Now not every retro track needs gameplay changes, however it's almost always appreciated when they do get some. Rainbow Road 3DS barely got changed aside from adding anti-gravity to the moon section. A good change to be sure, but once we look at our two main tracks for this video, it's gonna look like child's play in comparison. And you know what? I think it's about time we actually look at these two tracks to see what makes them such good adaptations. The first of the two we'll look at is Cheeseland. Like I said, both this and Ribbon Road come from Mario Kart Super Circuit. Funnily enough, this game in particular has gotten a lot of love in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, having 6 remade tracks so far. The other 4 are Mario Circuit, Sky Garden, Snowland, and Boo Lake. Now if you just kill the Sky Garden remake, all 5 of these retro tracks are among the best in the game. There's a very good reason for that, which we'll get to when we talk about the layout of the track, but I think I first want to focus on the aesthetic. As the name implies, it's cheese. Looking at both the original and the version of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, they take the name quite literally, as pretty much everything here is made from it. Interestingly though, this is also a sort of desert track, being easily the most unique desert track in the series. I mean, it's not like the competition is very strong. Do you really want to be known as a Desert Hills fan? Now despite both tracks being deserts made of cheese, they are actually a bit different in their execution of the theme. The original on Super Circuit has this background filled with cheese buildings, which have been taken over by rats. The buildings all look very unique, giving this a pretty memorable backdrop. One other interesting detail in the original is the very prominent Earth over the track. The Mario Kart 8 Deluxe version takes place in the daylight, presumably on Earth, so this is definitely a pretty interesting change. I'm guessing the original takes place on the moon to reference the whole moon is made out of cheese game theory. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, the developers lean a lot more into the desert angle with their aesthetic. You get many more glimpses at the large open land that wasn't possible on Super Circuit since it was on the Game Boy Advanced. While Mario Kart 8 Deluxe does lose the rat-infested buildings, they do get pizza, so I think it's pretty clear that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is the definitive winner aesthetic-wise. In Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, there's also a lot more cheese actually present on the track, which helps build the theming a bit more. Finally, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe also gains a few desert set pieces like cactuses for the background to make this more clearly a desert and cheese track mix. While I could understand some preferring the original direction in Super Circuits, I like the desert feel to the remake a lot more. Plus they of course gave this track a general graphic upgrade, and it's also the base Mario Kart 8 graphics, not the Booster Course one, so it looks phenomenal. The final aesthetic detail I want to touch on though is of course the music. Mario Kart 8's version is an absolute banger. I really enjoy using it in videos all the time, and I feel like it fits really well with the course. I'm really not good about talking about what makes me like a song, but I feel like it would have been wrong to just ignore this aspect of the tracks. With the aesthetic updates down, we still got the actual track itself we need to talk about. Now normally I would just go down the track and talk about notable set pieces, but before we do that I want to take a look at some specific additions that were included to once again help boost the theme of Cheeseland. Besides the aesthetic, the original track really didn't have anything tied into its design that helped support the theme. It had these rats near the end of the track, but that's about it. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe kills these rats, but in exchange they get a lot of small things that make this track much better. First off, throughout the road there are several holes that usually contain a coin. Obviously these holes are used to reference the holes in cheese, and they fit right into the track. The best part about them though is the fact that you can trick off of them, which is a perfect way to integrate a new modern Mario Kart mechanic. Had these been in the original, they likely would have made people hate the track because tricking wasn't added until Mario Kart Wii. This shortcut near the start of the track also got a minor cheese related update. Originally it was just some basic off-road, but now you actually have to cut through a hole in a piece of cheese, which makes this shortcut significantly more memorable than it was before. But now it's time we get onto the actual layout itself. I'll be talking through the Mario Kart 8 version and bring up whenever there are any major differences worth talking about, which, spoiler, there's a lot. The track opens up with some item boxes, which is nice as it's right before the cheese shortcut we mentioned before, meaning you could get lucky and get a mushroom right away to break into first place. This first turn also gives us our first few cheese holes that we can trick off of. Like I said, most of these also have coins in them, giving some more incentive to actually go into them at the start of the race. That brings the racers to a big turn, which isn't technically new, but it's greatly improved by Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's drifting, and especially the new purple sparks. That does bring us to an actual change though as we come to the first jump. Now despite all Super Circuit tracks being flat, this jump did indeed exist in the original. Oh yeah, I can't believe I didn't mention that yet. The entire layout of both this track and Ribbon Road get to actually play around with the Y-axis. Cheeseland here is a lot more hilly than it was before, which makes driving on it a lot more interesting. From here, the changes really ramp up with an anti-gravity section being thrown in. Well, it's less of a section and more so a majority of the course, as everything from this point on is anti-gravity. As Mario Kart 8's main feature, this is a nice change to throw in. It makes this tight turn in particular a bit more memorable. The second jump got an even bigger change than the first, as it's been transformed into a glider segment. These are always nice to add in as they make the tracks feel much grander, which is likely why most retro tracks have tried to implement them in some way. While flying down to the next bit of the land, we get to see our next obstacle, which is another new addition to the track, a chain chomp.
What the dog doing?
They essentially replaced the mouse enemies, which is a bit of an interesting decision, as chain chomps don't really relate to cheese at all, but I do think as obstacles they're more interesting. I guess this change comes down to if you're looking more for theming or more towards gameplay. Personally, I think the chain chomps spice up the gameplay enough to make them worthwhile. One thing I also like about the chain chomps is the fact that you can drive under them, which feels really fun to do. Our last stretch of the course has a lot of windy turns filled with cheese holes to trick on. Many of these turns, especially on 200cc, can be quite difficult to make, making the ending of this course feel appropriately intense. What also helps that feeling are the introductions of two massive shortcuts. While no Mario Kart race is truly over until it's over, that is especially true on Cheeseland, as Mario Kart 8 Deluxe added two new glider ramps near the end of the course. The first one lets you skip a majority of the turns on this anti-gravity segment. Doing this always feels super good, as you're almost always guaranteed to move up at least a few spots. The ending turn also has an off-road glider ramp, which isn't as grand as the one before, but it's nice to have one more shortcut before the end just in case you get a mushroom after the other ramp. These shortcuts are a major reason I find Cheeseland to be so fun to race on. I'm sure people may disagree, but I like how you almost always have a chance to catch up here, even at the very end of a race. It makes this last section of the course feel super intense no matter what position you're in, as you're hoping to get a mushroom or hoping no one else gets one. These ramps may even be the single change I like the most here, as it completely changes how this track feels for the better. If you take the normal path though, you go through another chain jump and a few extra jumps before reaching the line, which are some nice changes. And with that, we have reached the end of Cheeseland. Pretty much every section of this track receives some sort of change, and most of the time it was a major one too. Not only did it improve the aesthetic and theming of the original course, but it implemented the features from newer Mario Kart titles perfectly with 3 glider ramps, anti-gravity, and places to trick on. I would argue the feel of this track is almost completely different, but I don't find that to be a bad thing. It keeps what works from the original track, mainly the cheese theming, and turns it into a track that was 100% worth bringing back. It's to the point where it's nearly impossible to tell that this even was a retro track, with the only real clues being the classic rainbow colored walls from Super Mario Kart and Super Circuit hidden off to the side. Cheeseland isn't our only track we have to talk about today though, as there's one more Super Circuit track that got just as big of a change. In fact, its changes may even be bigger. It's time we take a look at Ribbon Road. We'll run through this track the exact same way we ran through Cheeseland, meaning we first gotta start with the aesthetic. Once again, this track is a very literal name, as the road here is obviously made out of ribbons on both versions of the track. But that's just about where the similarities aesthetic-wise end on these two versions of the track. While Cheeseland certainly did change its aesthetic from the original to be a bit more desert-like, Ribbon Road went in a completely different direction from its original version. Let's take a look at Super Circuit first so we can get an idea of just how much had been changed between the two versions. In the original, you drive along a red ribbon throughout the entire course. The background is lined with several different presents, as they are wrapped using ribbons, and they make the whole course feel more colorful. This also appears to be outdoors as well, seeing as we can see some clouds floating behind the presents. There are also some gifts present on the course as well, though they're only in the off-road. That essentially covers the theming of the original course, a colorful one filled with presents. A pretty solid and unique theme that they definitely could have stuck to if they wanted. However, the team behind this course's remake had an even better idea for this track. Instead of taking place in a gift-filled outdoor space, this version takes place in a child's bedroom. Excluding your little brother's Mario Kart Live track, this is the only track in this series like this, and it makes the aesthetic a lot more fun to look through. This bedroom is one of the most highly decorated backgrounds in the entire game, as you can see so many toys like this playset, a cart, a boomerang, and so much more. There's also a few presents around the room to pay homage to the track's original theme in Super Circuit. There's even a poster for a movie called Kung Fu Lakitu, which acts as a cute reference to the little panda fighter. It's impossible to go through every small detail hidden in the background here, so I seriously recommend taking a look for yourself because there are just so many Easter eggs. Not only did the background change though, but the track itself got a bit of an aesthetic update as well. Now instead of just driving on a red ribbon, the road has been split into 3 sections, a red, green, and blue road. Each of the sections have unique gameplay to them too, so we'll talk more about them in a moment. The final aesthetic thing I want to touch on here though is the music. While I think I prefer Cheeseland's theme overall, this is still very good. Interestingly, the original theme on Super Circuit is completely different. I saw some people in the comments saying that they prefer the original, and to be honest, they're all crazy, the 8 version is way better. Just like Cheeseland, Ribbon Road has a lot of additions to its gameplay that fits with its new theme. However, they're more confined to individual sections unlike the holes that we saw throughout Cheeseland, so I think it would be easier to just go through the course normally and comment on them as they come. The course begins on the red ribbon, which is the most simplistic of the 3 sections. This simply gives us a chance to get an item, along with being a pretty big turn that you might be able to get a purple spark on. The real changes to this track begin right after this turn as we make it to the jump. Once again, this track has been changed to actually utilize the Y-axis, which not only makes this jump more exciting, but it also allows there to be a small bump before the ramp as well, which is a small but nice change to keep the pace of the race fast. This brings us over to the green section, which has pretty much been entirely changed from the original. In Super Circuit, this would have just been a few simple turns, but now there are actual obstacles here in the form of Mecha Koopas. These guys serve 2 main purposes. For one, they obviously keep the track more interesting as they actually give you things to worry about since the original was a bit empty. The second thing they do though is enhance the theme of this being in a child's bedroom. Mecha Koopas are wind-up toys, so they make perfect sense as obstacles for this course. I also like how the green path matches with their color. It helps to make each section stand out and tie into itself a lot more. The road in this section is also a bit more wavy than the red path, which acts as a nice way to ramp up the difficulty for this course a bit. This waviness is expanded upon a lot in our third section, the blue ribbon. Right away we can see the main gimmick of this road, anti-gravity. This also once again displays the color coding in the road, as blue is the color Mario Kart 8 Deluxe uses to represent anti-gravity throughout the entire game. On top of the anti-gravity though, this road also waves up and down here, allowing people to trick off of it for some extra speed. Like the Mecha Koopas, not only does this make the gameplay much more interesting, but it also enhances the ribbon theme. And also, I want you to remember, the original version of this track is completely flat with 0 obstacles here. That makes its transformation into this all the more impressive. This segment also gets rid of the walls, giving the last portion of this track a significantly higher difficulty than the rest of it. The build up to this challenge felt very natural though, as the road got gradually more wavy as it went on. With the removal of the walls came the opportunity to add some extra shortcuts to the side of the track, and that's exactly what they did. There are 2 ramps off to the right of the road. The first is a simple boost panel, and the other one has a jump into a glider ramp. There is so much I love about these shortcuts, let's just run through all the reasons I think they're great. First off, they are made out of building blocks, which helps strengthen the aesthetic even more. Secondly, these don't require a mushroom to take. That's not to say I don't like mushroom shortcuts, I enjoy most of them quite a bit, it's just that it's sometimes nice to have shortcuts that you can take without a mushroom too. What's important though is that these shortcuts are balanced, as you wouldn't want first place to break too far ahead. That's what makes mushroom shortcuts so good. I think it's pretty safe to say that these are balanced though, as they're some of the hardest shortcuts to go for in the game. I usually don't even risk going for them, especially the second ramp later on. That makes them really cool though, as it feels super gratifying when you do manage to successfully go for them. They don't cut out nearly as much of the track as the ramps in Cheeseland, though these still keep the intensity high because of their difficulty and the fact that anyone can go for them at any time. Taking the road normally though has them riding the wavy ribbon until they eventually reach a glider ramp, which is also of course a brand new addition. What's interesting though is unlike the glider in Cheeseland, this doesn't replace any sort of jump. This is just a completely brand new addition that I think fits in really well. Like I said, they really love adding gliders to tracks, and it's for good reason. They're a lot of fun. This also gave them an opportunity to throw in some obstacles here, and of course they took that by adding in some clown cars to dodge. These are also designed around being toys, which means they once again help strengthen the theme. Upon landing, we end up back on the red ribbon for one last turn to the goal. That doesn't mean we're finished though, as there is one more cut through the off-road available with a mushroom, which keeps the last turn once again feeling intense, as you never know when someone might cut through there to steal first place. But that covers both Ribbon Road and Cheeseland. If it wasn't clear already, these tracks excelled in not only boosting their aesthetic themes, but also boosting their gameplay as well. I mean, we went from this to this. I think it's fair to say that these were some of the most changed retro tracks in the series. No other retro track in 8 Deluxe or any other Mario Kart go as far in changing the track, and that's what makes these feel so special. Even the other Super Circuit track remakes, while great, mostly, don't change quite as much as these do. In my opinion, every single change made to these tracks was for the better, and while this is of course up to the player themselves to decide, I am very comfortable saying that these changes were fantastic. So that's why these are not only the best retro tracks in Mario Kart history, but also some of the best tracks in the series period. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you all think Shy Guy Beach and Mario Kart Wii is actually the best retro track in the series and hate this video because of that? Let me know in the comments. While I'm fairly certain the Booster Course Pass won't reach these levels of retro tracks, it is nice to know that they're building up there. Boo Lake was really what inspired me to make this video now, as that probably got the best remake treatment of any course so far. Hopefully I get proven wrong and the Booster Course pads add an insane new retro track in Waves 4 through 6, but if they can at least stick to the level of Wave 3, I think I'll be alright. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.